We are moments away for our first match here, going to week number 4 with Firebat versus PNC. Firebat, the 2014 world champion, quite possibly the most famous competitive player in Hearthstone, just based off of the fact that you know, he's our first world champion. But over the years, you've had a lot of people join the ranks. I mean, Tice is the highest earner, and then you have you know, Hunter Race that recently won the world champion. Of course, Tom 60229 getting recognized by the president of Taiwan. You know, that's pretty sick. Yeah. But, you know, you never forget your first. And I think that's kind of what is important to note here going into the match. Firebat has, you know, true to his name, a fire lit under him, given that he wants to perform and recapture that magic from the first year, DJ, when he won on that BlizzCon stage.
Dan, I have recently become part of a very progressive movement known as the Firebat Deniers. I don't believe that he was, in fact, our first world champion.
It was a conspiracy.
It was a conspiracy.
Right. Because if you see the Hearthstone logo in the background, it doesn't line up with the wind speed.
It doesn't.
There's no wind in BlizzCon, right?
And in fact, even beyond that, Artosis was our first world champion. So,
well, that's just actually correct.
I felt like I had to say it. I'm sorry to anybody out there that's offended by my beliefs. But that's just the way it is. So
we don't write the rules.
We don't write the rules.
Sorry to disappoint people.
We just interpret them based off our own personal imagination.
All right. Well, with that, maybe Firebat can continue his path to redemption to prove that he was at one point a world champion with this Bomb Warrior. This is a mid-range variant of the Bomb Warrior that has less control tools and more aggression opportunities. Things like Grom and Cairn, Seaformian Bomber. Those are cards that you normally see in the secondary and tertiary deck. Versus PNC, he has the anti-warrior mage with the Caligos, the Power Creation, the Astromancer packages. Even that Twilight Drake might be very valuable. So, funnily enough, maybe we end up seeing a scenario where PNC just stays on his primary deck because most people, they tech for Warrior in the second and tertiary deck. PNC's like, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and have the Warrior bust package in my primary.
Yeah, his kind of risk, I guess, paid off. And, you know, looking at America's traditionally over the past 4 weeks of Grandmasters, it's not really a risk because Warrior has been one of the most brought decks in totality across the first 4 weeks of Grandmasters play. But I do want to point out that Firebat's Warrior list, which he shares with Purple, almost card for card, did struggle on Friday. It did not look great. It was losing Warrior mirror matchups to other slightly greedier Warriors, and I wasn't sold on the deck. But watching Purple play it yesterday in this match, it just feels like it has so much gas. And it was specific against Mage, it gets on the board a lot faster. And I don't know if PNC's very greedy techs are going to help. I think that the Twilight Drake is very good. I think that Twilight Drake is the card that could swing the matchup. But even beyond that, like Firebat even has a Spellbringer protected to this Warrior list. So I don't think that this list is specifically anti-mage, but I think that it's a little too fast for the greedy inclusions of PNC's quote-unquote anti-warrior mage to kind of keep up. Yeah. Which is a kind of a weird situation when you build your deck to beat a certain archetype, and then that archetype makes a few changes that makes it worse. It's kind of a unique situation that these players' decks match up against each other like that.
Right. I think it's you know, a really good example of how the rock paper scissors can aspect of it at the highest level, which is, you know, you expect the warriors to be greedy to sometimes beat the other warriors. And if PNC is anticipating, you know, more warriors coming out, he tries to preemptively get the advantage. But by doing so, Firebat choosing to play more aggressive ends up picking, you know, scissors when PNC is throwing paper to try to keep the rock.
Yeah.
And as a result, you played yourself. You know, if PNC just brought a more regular deck list, would he be more favored? That's questions that we're asking ourselves, and we'll see if it's answered at all in the series. Yeah. It's difficult, of course, to extrapolate based off just 2 or 3 games, but the result is everything. That's something that we kind of drive home in Grandmasters, is that you could theory craft and talk about optimal plays all you want till you're blue in the face, but in the end, you know, if you get the loss, that's what you take home. There's no brownie points for just being theoretically correct.
Yeah, even if you manage to take a game and then switch your deck, it doesn't matter because game score doesn't even factor into any of our tiebreakers across Grandmasters. So it's all about getting the match W. Right off the bat, PNC starts off with the triple Ray of Frost to kill the augmented Elec.
Yeah, that's a lot of respect.
It is a lot of respect, and I'm sure he saw Purple's match yesterday where he was just able to pretty much go aggro against mages, and PNC realizes that because of his greedy deck, he will have a late game advantage. He will have no shortage of threats, so it's not like he needs to keep his hand size high for Mountain Giant. It's not like he needs to find his threats quickly. He just needs to bide some time and then go for that big push before the bombs kind of reach that point in the game where he's taking significant amounts of damage.
Have I got a bomb for you?
Firebat there just curving out. 3-drop into 3-drop, 1-drop into 5-drop. Not a bad curve. PNC does seem to have answered pretty much all of it. But Firebat hasn't put any points of damage on. Only has 2 bombs shuffled into the deck. No Wrench Caliber to try and protect his board and fight. And I love the Conjurer's Calling play from PNC here, just trying to have board presence. Because it seems like the way you lose this matchup is by losing control of the board, taking too much damage early on in the game, and then not having a way to stabilize when the bombs kind of reach that point where they're threatening your life.
Yeah, that's where something that has been very surprising to me specifically about the bomb package in Warrior is that Warrior has the removal to protect their sizable threats. And when I say sizable, I use that fairly liberally because it's not that impressive. It's just a 3-mana 3/3. It's a 5-mana 5/5. Good enough, right? It passes the vanilla test, is what we usually call it in Hearthstone, which is based off its mana cost. It has an expected average stat line. It's decisively average. But because they're able to utilize Rush, they're able to utilize Dynamatics, they're able to utilize removal like Shield Slam, they can keep those minions on the board a lot longer than some of the other classes. And more importantly, they have additional latent damage. I like the comparison that Admirable and Gowan were making today. Wrench Caliber feels like 2 Ragnarok shots, 16 damage across the 2 bombs and the weapon swings. And it's like, well, that's a lot of damage that comes in.
It's a ton of damage.
Right. And, you know, and Warrior can continue to drag the game out so that once they invest their damage, they're paid off once the bombs are drawn. And so in this position, Firebat's thinking, how am I going to utilize my removal if I can? He has a very unique play of silencing his own minion and then utilizing it to either trade or push damage. And you can already see what's on Firebat's mind. He's pushing damage to Sephorian Bomber, recognizing that what's important in this matchup is giving Mage less time and not worrying too much about the board. He's a deck that can clear the board, or at least threaten to do so. Because if PNC continues to extend, let's say he plays Mountain Giant trade, he might be walking directly into a brawl, or he might be directly walking into other forms of clear.
Yeah. Firebat does know that PNC has that second half of the Conjurer's Calling in hand, so there is possibility for value trades. But at this point, Firebat's kind of like trying to figure out if he ever trades in this matchup, if he wins. And I'm just so sure that the answer has to be no. Because he doesn't have barely any ways to win the board. And PNC has a lot. Like, he has a lot to go on the board, especially with the way PNC's deck is built with the Calgo, the Power Creation, Astromancer. He just needs, like, one turn with a significant amount of pressure.
Yep. Looks like PNC is having a small hiccup in his internet. I apologize, by the way, I was looking at the wrong deck. Because Firebat does not have Brawl in his deck. So that should give PNC more, some more bravery to extend onto the board here. Firebat stuck in an awkward spot because of it. You can see the importance of using Conjurer's Calling on just some of these sizable threats. I mean, the fact that he's able to utilize it on 5-mana minions and get pretty decent / above average stats is already giving Firebat a lot of problems. And I don't really think Firebat has an easy way to pull out of it just from this alone. And one of the bombs being drawn means that there's not really much options here for Firebat. Even if he did have Dr. Boom, Blastmaster, it'd only be 2 Boom bots out right now.
Yeah. I mean, he could try and Dynamatic to soften up the board for Warpath, but he even knows now that PNC has the second Conjurer's Calling, since he used 1/2 of each to try and keep his Mountain Giant as cheap as he could.
Right.
So it's just kind of a brutal situation overall. for Firebat, because let's say he sinks some damage into one of these big 5-drops. PNC can just Conjur's Calling it, protect it from Warpath, and then Firebat's back to square one.
Right, and now PNC has the Acidic Swamp Ooze for the weapon. It seems like his tech for Warrior is really paying off right now. At least, maybe not necessarily for Warrior, but just having that weapon removal in the front half of his deck, as opposed to the secondary and tertiary deck.
Yeah, and not having the Brawl here for Firebat is bad because you can't remove the board, but it's also bad because there's no reason for PNC to hold back.
Right, now you can Mountain Giant and Conjur's Calling.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no reason not to at this point.
There's no Super Collider, there's no Brawl. Warpath doesn't even begin to touch this board. He's going to do 4, which doesn't even kill the 5-drops.
Yeah.
It doesn't even allow him to swing with Wrench Caliber to kill off this Grave Warrior. I think this game is done already. Well, Dr. Boom, Mad Genius maybe, but there's 28, 29 damage showing with a ping. Even if you play Dr. Boom, Mad Genius, you're still only alive with, what, 7 health? 5 health?
There is a very small possibility, which is PNC drawing all the bombs remaining. So there's 3 bombs in the deck right after this Wrench Caliber shuffles in.
Yep.
And if Firebat draws 1 more bomb, because he will get another turn, there is this very small remote possibility. It's very tiny, because that's assuming PNC will draw 4 bombs consecutively.
4 bombs consecutively with 20 cards left in his deck. It's going to be a little less now because PNC is going to draw a card from this magic trick.
The tools
Yeah.
of creation.
And in fact, if I'm PNC, I'd be very careful to draw cards. I think that's what he's thinking. It's like, oh my gosh, actually, I have to be careful not to draw bombs because that's his last out.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh gosh,
Yeah.
could have been disastrous. In fact, he actually doesn't really have to do too much here. He can just simply use a Conjur's Calling or play a Twilight Drake. Just do something to make sure that he's continuing to pile on pressure.
Yep.
And Firebat, does he have one final out remaining?
Ah.
It doesn't look like it, because he only can deal 3 damage to the Zap Cannon. Town Crier can pull out a Zilliax, but not enough.
Yeah. No way for even Firebat if PNC were to draw every single bomb. There's only 3 in the deck currently, which means that the tiny, tiny chance that he has to draw 3 in a row still doesn't kill him.
Yeah, so PNC able to just effectively pick up out this board. I mean, it really didn't matter even if he didn't have Shooting Star. He had the hero power to get the Divine Shield. And game 1 goes to PNC very convincingly. I think this kind of opening hand, though, from PNC, which just having a lot of Conjur's Calling and early game board, is what really leads to success. And you can also see that the Mountain Giant Conjur's Calling was just icing on the cake. He actually just won the board decisively before that, too.
Yeah, he could have just played like Ooze, Twilight Drake.
Yeah, and would have still won.
Still won.
This helped him win a couple turns faster.
Yes.
Which sometimes makes all the difference.
Yeah.
But largely, you know, PNC was in the driver's seat, and more importantly, if you play a mid-range curve deck like Warrior that doesn't have that card draw source without the Acolytes of Pain, with only 1 copy of Town Crier, you are sometimes subjecting yourself to the possibility that you draw the wrong half of your deck.
Yeah.
And Firebat did that. He drew Omega Devastator, he drew a Dynamac that was not applicable, and a Grom, and those just sat in the hand the entire game because those were situational response or cards that need to play in the late stages of the game.
Yeah, it's a kind of interesting first game, and you know, we saw Purple able to take a win yesterday, but the Brawl came in clutch. That's the one difference that Firebat and Purple have in their lineups, is that Firebat has a Cairn and Purple has a Brawl.
Right. And the Brawl is pretty useful in that spot specifically.
In that spot specifically.
No guarantee that it would have still turned out okay, because if the Brawl ended up letting the Mountain Giant survive, then it's the same exact story. He just Conjur's Calling and then go all in.
Yeah.
But that's still a brutal first loss here. I kind of wonder if Firebat can even potentially switch. His other options are to remove that Grom, Cairn, Seaphorian Bomber package and to play a Brawl, a Weapons Project, a Darius Crowley, and Omega Assembly. That's okay.
Yeah.
But he's losing a lot of his ability to pressure.
He's losing a lot of that mid-game stuff. The Elec, the Devastator, and the Seaphorian Bomber, all I feel are necessary to kind of snowball early boards. And it kind of goes back to just the turn was a turn 3 play from PNC, triple Ray of Frosting the Augmented Elec.
Yeah,
because not every player is going to make that that decision, they'll try and leave that up on the board and go for a big swing, try and buy some time, maybe just one Ray of Frost and a ping. But that allowed him to snowball his own board, because if that 3-4 had stuck around, it kills his Zilliax, and then he doesn't have the option to Conjur's Calling the first 2 5-drops to kind of get pressure on the board. So PNC definitely recognizing very well what he needs to do. And Firebat,
he's switching to his secondary deck. He's got the Weapons Project. He's got the Town Crier #2, which is fairly important. Omega Assembly #2, Brawl, and Darius. He's taking out an Augmented Elec. Took out an Omega Devastator. In fact, he has no Omega Devastators in his deck now. No Safarian Bomber, no Karen, no Grom. Those are cards that were a factor last game. Almost all of them, in fact. Meanwhile, PNC, he's staying on his primary deck. There's no need for him to mess with success, especially since he has another target with his Ooze and his Harrison in the form of that Weapons Project. Should be even more applicable now than it was before. You know, the action was kind of fast and furious, so there's like a lot of moments where it's like, you know, is there mulligan decisions that should be considered? Were there trading opportunities there for Firebat to restrict the board from going it? But at the same time, his game plan is fairly straightforward. And that is one downside of this Warrior deck that I noticed, is that the game plan is fairly linear.
Yeah.
Which is to play stuff, go face, and hope your opponent draws bombs. And while that can be very powerful, we just saw it slip up a little bit in terms of its curve out potential and got really far behind. And it feels fairly similar to the Mech Paladin, where it was, if you fall behind on board and you just like have nothing, it feels like you can never really get back very easily.
Yeah, that seems to be how this deck works. And, you know, it does have a little bit more comeback tools. You know, it has the ability to rush mechs with Dr. Boomad Genius. It has Warpath. It has a decent amount of rush minions plus Shield Slam. But I am curious for the choice here for Firebat. I know Firebat was one of the players early on, I think in like week 2, against a field of mages, said how important he thought Weapons Project was to be able to deal with the mage playing the tempo Sorcerer's Apprentice, because it is the only way outside of being on the coin, armor up coin Shield Slam. Maybe the redundancy on the Town Criers, the Weapons Project, Brawl, and Darius Crowley, maybe that's his way to kind of gain a little bit of tempo and maybe snowball this game a little bit better than he did last game. He's got the early curve to do it. Starting off with a Town Crier, has Augmented Elec into Clockwork Goblin. Is going to have kind of that dead turn on turn 2. But other than that, pretty decent start for Firebat.
Yeah, I think we might be able to see how important that Town Crier is, just to make sure that Firebat has that curve guarantee.
Yeah.
And, I mean, with the one copy of Elec, this is close to the ideal hand that Firebat can have, outside of course, lining up things like his Blastmaster Boom and Wrench Caliber.
Yeah.
PNC has a lot of good stuff here.
Honestly, I wouldn't have been opposed to just seeing on turn 1 coin Elemental Evocation Mana Cyclone into Mana Cyclone. Putting 4 random spells in your hand, plus putting 2 2/2s on board. You'd fill up your hand, give yourself a lot of options in the coming turns, and have an answer not only the Town Crier, but also the first threat that Firebat would play. The Banana Buffoon kind of serves a similar purpose with the coin, because it will answer this Town Crier. And this is interesting also. Firebat, instead of playing a 3-drop, knowing that it'll die to the Banana Buffoon plus bananas, actually going to go for a Omega Assembly on 3 to try and fish for a mech that can help his overall game plan. Beryllium Nullifier. Already Firebat's game plan is almost completely changed from game 1.
Yeah, I think the idea is that Firebat wants to invest into his future curve, which is something that we're not really used to seeing. And yeah, like the Beryllium Nullifier here, or the Omega Assembly rather, here to get the Beryllium Nullifier, just shows that, one, he's respecting his opponent's board, so things like Conjur's Calling can't mess with him early on. But also because I think Firebat realizes that just trying to curve out isn't really going to work against the mage right now.
Like, if you ignore your opponent's board, he's going to take the value trade and Conjure's Calling, and then you fall really far behind. And the average 3-mana minion is actually a fairly important inflection point now, because for some reason, after Spider Tank, the gates were bust open with 3-mana 3/4s, TJ.
They're everywhere.
There seems like there's so many of them that can punish, and that's a huge stat jump because conversely, 2-mana minions feel like they've never been weaker before. That was partially why Prince Keliseth was such a important foundational tool for a lot of these curve decks in the past year, was because there weren't a lot of good 2-mana minion alternatives. People were playing Amani Berserker. That's how desperate they were to have like a good, powerful 2-mana minion.
Yep, just a neutral minion that's been around for forever.
You think Zoo
The classic set.
didn't want to play a lot of 2-mana minions to curve out? Like, I mean, they did, obviously, because Keliseth was good, and they had all these 1-drops, but ideally having powerful 2-drops is great. You know, remember the Totem Golem days.
Yeah.
So 3-mana minions is actually significant power spike, funny enough.
There was a lot more 3/3s printed with like a secondary effect, right?
Right.
And there's actually a surprising amount of 3/4s.
Yes, and that is very hard for Warrior to deal with, especially if they're coming up on a Wrench Caliber turn.
Yeah.
Now you can see that PNC chose to go for a double Mana Cyclone. This is something that I see a lot of mages do when they feel like their hand is lacking plays, and Mana Cyclone, it's very easy to get sucked in, pun intended, to believe that you need to go for a max value per Mana Cyclone, but don't forget that Warrior wants to win the board. And more importantly, PNC doesn't know if Firebat switched or not, so there could be some mind games of like, well, if he's still playing that curve-out, tempo-oriented deck with Cairn, Grommash, and C4 Bomber, I want to preemptively get ahead and do the same thing back to Warrior, which is utilize your random spells to push damage and remove the board. So in this case, utilizing Shooting Star, Ray of Frost, Frostbolt, etc., remove the board and push 6 damage. Which honestly I think is an underrated part of this deck. I think a lot of people look at Mage and they think of it being just a Conjure's Calling deck, but sometimes you just play Tempo Mage.
That's why I think unexpected results should just go in the deck.
I don't blame you in terms of like at least considering that possibility. I mean, if you look at it, this just reminds me of the old days of like Mana Worm and Flame Waker. Obviously, a lot less of a explosive start, but the idea is that you get ahead on board, use every removal tool and stall opportunity to keep pushing damage every turn. This Warpath is going to be very useful for Firebat. I mean, he could use it this turn. He could also set up for next turn as well. Both are viable options.
But it's going to be about whether or not Firebat can actually grab tempo for himself at any point in this game.
He should be able to once Beryllium Nullifier hits because of just how difficult it is for Mage to deal with a Fairy Dragon, and now you have a 4/8.
Yeah,
That's,
you can't even
very tricky.
Ray of Frost it to freeze it to get rid of the magnetized potential.
And then Zilliax comes down.
Or Snip Snap.
Snips, snaps, TJ. Plural. We're entering that territory where Snip Snap gets to truly shine. It's not the magnetic and the death rattle that really makes Snip Snap the fearsome thing it is, because quite frankly, that is just like a lot of other magnetic abilities.
Yeah.
It's the echo, which is already a departure from the norm. Part of the reason why I think Snip Snap is just cool as a card, TJ, is because we don't have bleed over mechanics like that very often in Hearthstone, where Witchwood, which the focus mechanic was echo, along with a few other things, and then the Boomsday Project, which is magnetic and mechs. And, you know, usually they kind of stay more isolated to it, but it seems like this year with lackeys and apparently magnetic and echo, we're having a little bit more blend across the expansions, which makes it more thematic throughout the year.
The standard year.
Yeah, the standard year, excuse me. And I like that.
Yeah.
I want to see more of that because I think there's a lot of cool mechanics in Hearthstone that I feel like could use a little bit extra shine and polish.
Well, one of the main reasons why I like Snip Snap is because it uses the long-lost art of leet speak, Dan.
Using numbers and symbols to replace letters?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I remember the days.
Well, those days are now. Once again, Dan, you can now relive your early gaming days of leet speakifying every single term you use.
Yeah, I mean, some players do it, right? Chonsu and Frozen have a 0 in their name.
Wow.
I could have a 0 in my name. I could be FR0 Dan.
You should rebrand.
Or maybe instead of the A, I can have a 4.
I don't think I could do it.
Behold the tools of creation.
Yeah, Sanders has. And if you have vowels,
TJ.
you can replace.
I could go T33J4Y. Whoa! I'm freaking out!
I'm freaking out! My voice just keeps getting more hysterical every single time.
Wow, you make it even better admirable than Admirable does.
All right, well, PNC wants to take care of this Darius. He's actually using both of his Rays of Frost, which is fairly interesting. I thought he maybe just freeze it and then maybe even draw cards so that his Mountain Giant gets cheaper. Because if he wants to freeze and draw, then he sets up for a potential Khadgar Mountain Giant Conjurer's Calling. Because Mountain Giant would cost 4 next turn. But it could have costed 3, and then... Actually, he wouldn't have enough mana for that, because it'd be 7 mana. Mountain Giant would cost 3. And then the Khadgar Mountain Giant Conjurer's Calling would be 8 mana total. No, it wouldn't, because he has Sorcerer's Apprentice on the board. Yeah, that might be like a slight thing where like PNC, he purposely chose this obviously to do the 2 extra damage to the Rays of Frost. Unless I'm being, unless I missed it, TJ, we're too busy bantering. Were they both the last cards in the hand?
I don't know.
Because sometimes the mages split the Rays of Frost so that they keep their hand count high, but if they were the last copies of it, then I apologize.
I don't think he's used Ray of Frost on anything else in this game, so... Oh wait, no, he didn't. Because he Frostbolt Shooting Stars to clear the board before that.
Okay, so it was the copy that he got off the Mana Cyclone.
Yes.
All right, I apologize. I'm going to start paying more attention and stop trying to banter with TJ here. Yes, so that was the first copy of it, and then the second copy was the second version of it. If he were, if that is true, that assumption, he could have had a 3-mana Mountain Giant, a 2-mana Khadgar, and a 2-mana Conjurer's Calling, and be able to just go off and win. Because Warrior does not answer that without the Brawl, and even if they have the 1-of copy of Brawl, chances are you're most likely going to win the board because you have the second Conjurer's Calling.
Yeah.
Instead, PNC, I mean, this is still a powerful board, don't get me wrong. It's just not the auto win that it felt like it could be.
Yes. Now the big choice here to protect the Sorcerer's Apprentice or get rid of the possibility of a Ziliax Magnetize. Or Snipsap Magnetize. Snipsap he could play 2, which would answer the Great War on board, but because this would go up to 7 attack and 9 health.
The push for damage was also a setup for a 2-turn lethal, because your opponent will get at 19 and you have 18 showing, and then he had Stormwind Champion, which is like a really funny way to think about the lethal setup.
Yeah.
But it's something worth weighing on PNC's mind.
Yeah.
Now, Firebat's thinking, well, how do I get myself out of this pickle? Am I just playing Blastmaster Boom and hoping the Boombots clean up?
Oh, jeez. There's only 2 Boombots up. Clockwork Goblin was the only bomb card played.
Yeah, things are just not panning out. PNC has a lethal opportunity here with Power of Creation.
Also can go Khadgar plus Conjurer's Calling.
Yeah, I mean, this is the reverse play. I was just considering that there might be a possibility of it.
With either Reckless Rocketeer or Argentina. Both would have been lethal outs.
And this Ice Barrier to mess with Firebat's head. I mean, it's not going to do anything, but it wants to force Firebat to, if he had only the 1-of Brawl. And now Firebat's going to shield block.
Into Brawl.
I see a 5-mana card.
Ah, Harrison.
It's not it. Is there any opportunity here for Firebat to potentially close in? If a Boombot takes out 1 Mountain Giant, and if a Turning Mover and Ziliax combine forces, how much damage would PNC be able to push through? He would still have 16 plus 14, which is 32 damage. Yeah, that's still plenty.
Yeah. If he magnetizes onto a Boombot here, he heals for 4, and then he can heal for 8 maximum if PNC doesn't have a way to deal with Ziliax. And actually gets a good bomb outcome because he gets to get this healing and take out the Grave War.
But Blizzard plus paying already, we know, should be able to do it, or even a Conjurer's Calling.
I think he's dead on board unless something crazy happens.
Yeah, there's absolutely no possible way. And PNC is going to cruise to a 2-0 victory. Mage striking back against the Warrior, which is exactly what PNC was looking for in this matchup. Or rather, when he's submitting his decks. And Firebat takes his first 0-2 performance in Grandmasters. He's been going 1-1 for most of the week so far. But with a loss to Eddie, with a loss to PNC this week, is now 0-2, which is definitely not the performance I think he was looking for. And more importantly, this deck list for Firebat also did not perform as expected. He went up against another Warrior. He went up against a Mage. And I think those are two classes that you think about the most when you enter a Specialist format right now, and yet did not pan out for him.
No. Purple, who just had the one card difference, at least in the primary list, did have a little more success. He went 1-1, losing to Warrior and taking a win against Mage. But it seemed like PNC, with just his primary list, had that overall advantage.
Yep.
And also PNC now ties Firebat in the standings. They're both at 3-5 after this. Firebat moves down and PNC moves up. So especially with how close their division is currently, 3-5 does not disallow you from playing from qualifying for playoffs. There's still a chance that PNC could win out from here and still make it to the playoffs. So definitely a lot of chances still left for him. And also PNC overcoming some obstacles this week with his victories.
Yeah, that's right.
Or at least last week. I think the rogue game that he played last week, where he was just disconnecting constantly, still able to pull out a victory in that game, and it seemed like a little bit this game as well. So victory in the face of adversity.
Yep. Let's go ahead and chat with PNC, who is on the line. What's up? Are you there?
Hey, what's up?
Cool. So seems like your internet's holding you up better. I don't. It looks like you're kind of in the same spot. Did you end up changing locations this week?
No, I'm still playing from home, but it was working fine all week. But so the game was working fine today as well, but just getting spikes and the mini disconnects, but it was fine.
Gotcha. All right. So, and another win here for you, which is important to move up the standings. Talk to us a little bit about this Mage deck list in particular, because you seem to have borrowed like a lot of that greedy top end with Astromancer, Power of Creation, and then having all these like greedy things in the beginning half. But you also still had the Mana Cyclone, so it's kind of like half of the Summoner package, half of the Mana Cyclone. Why bring it for this week?
Yeah, so it's just a normal like anti-warrior mage that everyone's playing. So when I was thinking about what my opponents were going to bring, so I assumed the Firebat was bringing warrior, and I couldn't tell what Frozen was going to bring. So I just decided to hard counter Firebat, and I was expecting Frozen to play maybe Paladin, because he's playing Massey and me, and we both like mage and rogue, and so Paladin was fine. So I had a decent sideboard for Paladin, but yeah, I wasn't expecting the token druid. That was
we definitely did not as well. Do you think that like talk to me a little bit, maybe not necessarily too much, because I realize this could be giving away a strategy, but why do you think like some players, like what makes players likely to bring a deck like Firebat bringing warrior versus Frozen where you're not sure he's going to bring?
Oh, hello. Wait, I didn't hear the question.
No worries. I phrased it really poorly. So now I get a second chance. PNC, what do you think makes Firebat more predictable to bring Warrior, or more likely to bring Warrior, versus Frozen? You're not sure what he's going to bring week to week.
I don't know. It's just depending what the players like. I know like Eddie and Firebat, they really like Warrior, it seems. So, and it suits their playstyle. So I don't know. I just assumed it was going to be Warrior. But then there are players like Massey and Amnesiac and, I don't know, Saiyan from the other group. And I include myself as well there. I would just like to bring different stuff every week and try to predict what our opponents are going to bring. And yeah, so it's harder to read us.
Do you think it's important to have that aspect, just to like bring a bunch of different decks and make it difficult to read? Or is that a personal preference, you think?
What they're doing is fine as well, because it's like, so yeah, so if I was playing Rogue, for example, this week, then I would have went 0-2, right? So I took a big risk bringing the anti-warrior list, and it paid off, but maybe it won't next time. So I don't know.
Gotcha. So you don't really feel like it's better to do one way or the other. It's just a personal preference. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. TJ, any questions here for PNC while his internet holds up?
Yeah. So you're 3-5 now in the standings, which still kind of puts you in the bottom half. But it seems like over the past couple weeks, you've kind of been on the up and up, at least as far as your, your games have gone and how your decks line up. How confident are you going into the last 3 weeks of play here? Do you think that you have a good shot of making playoffs, and are you feeling good with your own play and your own decks now? Good enough, at least, to give you a shot?
Yeah, I'm feeling way more confident now than I was at the beginning. Like, I took a really long break from Hearthstone and came back for the beginning of Grandmasters. And like the first 2 weeks, I was playing very bad, and I don't know, I was very stressed and nervous, and it was like hard to play. But now it's like everything's like going back to normal, so feeling way more confident now.
Yeah, and I think it shows.
It
you know,
does.
the first week when you were roping, and I mean, I don't know how much was internet connection,
Oh,
maybe,
yeah.
but yeah, like
Yeah,
it was.
the 100 game against Firebat, yeah, that was like a bit of both. Like,
Okay.
I couldn't decide what to do, so it was a roping every turn, and then I had to wait like 5 seconds every animations, like
Right.
combination of both. Yeah, now it's like way better.
Well, also you chose not to bring Mech Hunter, which is still looking for his first win in Grandmaster. All right. Well, we've taken enough of your time. Thank you so much, PNC, for joining us, and congrats on the win. See you next week.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So that does it for our first series. Definitely, if you're a Firebat fan, you're scrambling or you're in shambles a little bit because PNC, you heard it from his mouth, he was hard countering and targeting Firebat.
Yeah.
And I know that Firebat will be listening to that. He's definitely going to be watching his own VODs of his play, reviewing it, and posting about it on social media. But more importantly, I wonder if he's going to listen to what PNC says and says, you know what, maybe I'm too predictable and I'm going to have to change it up. Or maybe that's exactly what his opponents want to do. And if he changes it up, he messes with his formula for success.
Yeah.
That's part of the mind games that comes into it when you have a league like this.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting week to week. It's also kind of cool to hear players talk about like how they get their information. A lot of it's just like gut feeling, which doesn't seem.
I mean, yeah, go ahead, DJ. Sorry.
Yeah,
I want to say something.
Some of it's gut feeling. Some of it may be trying to hide information of like.
That's exactly what it
of
is.
like I don't want to reveal to them how I'm scouting them out. You know, Firebat is one of the more public-facing players. So like sometimes he, is on other players' streams or other players on his stream. They may give away a little bit more information.
Right.
But I think there is a lot of merit to being unpredictable and at least showing people that you like bringing other classes and that you can be successful with other classes.
It's true. I personally believe that if I'm a pro player at any kind of like strategy game where information is directly correlated to power, I want to try and hide as much of it as I can for my own personal sake, or even mess with my opponents. In the interview, just be like, yeah, I can't really figure out what a player like Frozen's going to bring, but I know exactly what he's going to bring.
Yeah.
And I could try to counter that.
Yeah. Well, Toga Druid, I think, no matter what kind of read you had on Frozen, just came out of left field.
That's fair. We're going to be seeing that later on today, but as we take a break and get ready for our second match, it's going to be Dog coming up against Just Sand. So it's a battle between two North American Titans. We'll be back with more Hearthstone Grandmasters action right after this.